Hello! So I've already read all the books for this video, but I'm coming back here at the end to give you an intro clip. So I've read the first 3 books in the Dresden files now. Stormfront, Full Moon, Grave Peril. Those other books are just there to fill dead space for the thumbnail. I've read these 3 books. I've vlogged the experience. This is a series that I did not plan on reading at all, and I go into the why in the video. And now I've read 3 books, and I have a lot of thoughts. I did keep this vlog spoiler free for that way if anybody is a fan of the series, you can see me experiencing it for the first time. If you're not a fan, you're on the fence, you have whatever reason you clicked the video, hopefully you can watch it. There are a couple of clips where I go into mild spoilers to help me make a point, but I will have text on the screen to warn you of that and giving you places to skip to if you want to skip over that to make this video okay to watch even if you're really spoiler sensitive. So, you know, you've been warned, but I'm really excited to talk to you about these books, so I hope you enjoy the vlog. So I've started Stormfront. I am 165 pages in. Chapter 12 is where I am. Okay, first of all, how did I not know that Harry was a wizard? I feel like I knew that this was a, what's it called? Urban fantasy. I knew that this was urban fantasy, and I knew that he was a detective. Neither of these things are buzzwords for me, but if someone would have said, hey, he's a wizard, I might have picked this up sooner. I bet a lot of people have said that, and I've just forgotten. Anyway, Harry's a wizard. That's so much more interesting. He's a detective in the real world, but his specialty, he works for the police force as a wizard investigating supernatural crimes. That's way better. And he's also a private detective. So we could do private hires for, you know, supernatural issues or disappearances. So there are definitely some detective scenes and chapters where we're doing the detective, like we're going to a crime scene and we're investigating a murder, or we're meeting up with a client who wants to do a private hire for reason X. And those chapters are a lot less interesting to me, but the world building and the magic are already astounding in this book. First of all, the way he's weaving magic into this world, the way he's describing Harry not wanting to enter an elevator or not wanting to do like these very commonplace things because he's like, okay, yes, but if there's a demon on my back, then why wouldn't they be targeting the lead investigator for this crime? Or if I do this, then because of the way magic works or because of the way this particular creature works, then they could combat me this way. And so it is first person, and I've mentioned several times, especially recently, it keeps coming up that first person is not my preferred perspective, but it won't ruin a book for me. But the way world building, like these little details about how this world functions and how these supernatural creatures interact with the world while still being kind of invisible to the wider world, but all the things that he has to think through in order to navigate this unique position he's in, like all these little details are sprinkled in so well, where it's not info dump, it's not a scene just dedicated to delivering information. It's like every scene is a part of the story, and then the information is just sprinkled in there in little bitty pieces all throughout this first half of the book. It's done so well and so seamlessly, and it feels so natural, but it's also really interesting the way it's done, where I'm like, oh yeah, okay, so all this stuff really exists in my world and I'm just not seeing it. And I love that. Plus the magic too. Like the way he's introducing the magic and how interesting it is, like being able to look into someone's soul, and then that also opens a window to your soul so they can see inside of you and how that affects people. Like those little details are also fascinating. There are some scenes that I'm finding really goofy, like so Harry's a boob guy. We know that real quick in the story because there will not be a chest introduced, there will not be a woman introduced into the story without Harry describing her boobs. But what's funny about it is that it doesn't always fit, like it doesn't always work. It's just kind of shoehorned in there. Like, I'll give you an example in chapter 2, so very, very early on in the book, but it is the first crime scene that we encounter. So if you don't want to have that, because the way this scene is written is actually really fantastic. So if you haven't read the book yet, I would recommend skipping to that timestamp, just because I want you to experience the scene, but it is just in chapter 2, so it's not a big deal. but I think you should experience the scene on your own. But it's so goofy because it says, it's describing the people who were killed. They were in bed. She was astride him, body leaned back bowed like a dancer, the curves of her breasts making a lovely outline. Skip down a few lines, except that the lovers' rib cages on the upper left side of their torsos had expanded outward through their skin, the ribs jabbing out like ragged, snapped knives. So it's just funny because it's like the curves of her breast making a lovely outline, but also her chest is ripped open and her rib cage is sticking out in jagged directions. And it's like, which one is it? What's the outline here? Something very beautiful and enticing, or a ripped open chest with rib cage going everywhere? Like, I think that that's hilarious. But to say something positive about the scene, because I actually really love the way this scene is written. Right before he walks in, or right before what I just read to you, this is when he first walks into the room of the crime scene. It says, I looked, noted details mechanically, and quietly shut the door on the part of my head that had started screaming the second I entered the room. Oh my goodness, that's so good. But just in general, the prose of this book is actually really, really great. I guess because one thing that I've heard about this series a lot is just get through the first few books and then you'll see all this series has to offer. Yeah, the first few books are rough, but just get to this point and then, whoa, the series will wow you. And so I kind of just expected the first book to be kind of trash, honestly. Like, I kind of expected it to be a big old disappointment, but it's actually really, really well written. The prose is really good. The world building and the way he's introducing different elements of this world and of the magic is really skillful. It's a fantastically fleshed out and formed world already halfway through book one. A short book too. Only 100 and I've lost, my pen fell out. Only 165 pages into the book, and already I'm like so invested in the world. I don't care about detective stories, and so I'm not really interested in the detective side of this, and Harry has not won me over as a protagonist yet, so I'm not hooked, but this is a really strong start. I finished Stormfront and it was really good. With the way Butcher, I think easily the most impressive thing about this book is the world building. With the way Butcher just introduces concepts and pieces of this world and pieces of the creatures in the world and the mechanics of like the tools that that Dresden utilizes and things like that. The way he introduces it in just this very quick, brief moment of movement where, for instance, something attacks Harry and then he uses his shield bracelet, and just within a sentence or two, what the bracelet is introduced and what it does is introduced, and then he uses it and we move on and we continue action. And this happens with the creatures of the world. This happens with the setup of the role that Dresden plays in the world. It happens through basically every piece of information that we need to read this story and to understand the setting that we're in. It's introduced, explained, and we move in a way that's so well done. Like, I really feel like the world building in this book is like a masterclass of how to introduce things without it being an info dump, how to introduce a lot of information in small pieces when it's relevant and only when it's relevant, and then to trust your reader to be able to use their brains and utilize that information rather than to halt the story or to hold the reader's hand or to over-explain things or to explain it too many times. I feel like people are way too hard on this book. Like, I hear so many people say you could basically just skip books 1 and 2 because they're so bad. Or even Butcher himself says that the first 2 books aren't any good. Or just get through the first 3 books and then you'll see what Dresden is about. And that's been the main thing that's put me off on this series, is people so undercutting the first book and the second book too, but I haven't read that one, so I can't comment on that. But just knowing, like, just get through 3 books and then it'll get good. Like, no, absolutely not. There's no reason for me to put myself through that when there are books that are actually good to read. What are you on about? This is a really solid book. Is it the most astounding book I've ever read? No. Does it have flaws? You betcha it does. But unreadable? I still don't know how I feel about Harry yet. I feel like I don't quite understand him first. When I first started the book, I thought that he was your standard, typical detective. I still don't know Harry yet. There's definitely more to him than I thought there was at the beginning of this book, but I think I need to spend more time with him to really understand him. But he's interesting, and I'm happy to do that. Also, the conflicts in this book were really solid, not just the action, and oh my goodness, the action, this book never stopped moving. Like, there really wasn't, and not in a way where anything felt rushed, but there just wasn't a moment. There was the appropriate amount of breathing time between big things that happened, but at the same time there wasn't any time where it felt like the book dragged. It felt like momentum continued throughout world building sections. It just never stopped moving. But then too, also internal conflicts and relational conflicts and conflicts within the workplace that were mistakes made and decisions that were very human that actually had really strong consequences and that have affected people. And I'm really excited to see how that plays out. Like, I really, really want it to play out well. I want to see not everybody just forgive each other in the next book and, you know, we kind of forget about the conflicts of book one, but we left book one with seeing consequences to the decisions that we made. And I really want that to continue in book two and to see Harry have to work to fix what's been damaged. Like, I really hope that that's what happens. Detective stories that I've read, a lot of times it's basically a lot of companions. Each detective novel is its own standalone, and it's the detective just doing a new thing. And that's how book one felt. It really feels like, okay, I know what the series is now. I know what we're doing. I know who Harry is and what role he plays. I know what the world is like, and the next detective story it'll expand on the world, but it'll still just be Harry taking on a case, solving the mystery, and some really awesome world building. And while I love the world building in the series, I don't need a series of standalones of Harry solving cases. That's just not very interesting to me. So I would quit after the first book. But because I've been told that this series gets to be so much bigger than that, and that it's not just a series of isolated detective stories, I'm curious to see what it does. I don't know what I should be expecting, but I enjoyed it enough that I'm more than happy to continue on. So I'm gonna do that, which is good because this video would be over very quickly if I didn't. Anyway, book one done. Great success. Way better than I thought it was gonna be. Full Moon. I'm about halfway through this book. Almost halfway. Right there, just finished chapter 16, which was an unfortunate chapter for me to stop at before doing this clip, but that is at about the halfway point, so here we are. Sorry if the rain is obnoxious. I'll hold the mic a little bit close so that hopefully you mostly hear me. But Full Moon has been an interesting start so far. So this time we're dealing with a lot of werewolves and werewolf lore. And werewolves are not a fantasy creature that I personally have a lot of interest in, but I'm really liking the way it's done in Full Moon. I think that there's a lot of layers to the different types of werewolves and to what's normal for them, and as well as like how the condition that they have, the curse that they have, can be used and twisted against them in the scenarios that they're having to deal with in Full Moon. So I'm really actually liking the werewolf lore in this book when I typically don't. And once again, this book, its strongest suit, for me at least, is the world building. I just think that Jim Butcher is really, really fantastic at building a world, a really intricate, interesting, unique world in our setting, but behind the curtain there's all these things going on, which is called urban fantasy. He's really, really skilled at taking typical fantasy tropes and character types and creatures and doing something really different and then weaving it into the story in a really seamless way. Just brilliant, phenomenal, fantastic. Some things that I'm starting to notice are a pattern, and so are getting annoying. Some things that are getting annoying is, okay, so we talked in the last book about how Harry's a boob guy. He's got to describe all the boobs that have ever existed and come in his path. But there are these scenes that are getting annoying that, to put it bluntly, are just immature, I think. So in book one, there was a scene where a character and I'm going to speak about this vaguely because I'm trying to keep this vlog spoiler free, but there's a character that accidentally takes a love potion, and in this scene they're being attacked by a demon, and Harry is naked because he got caught in the shower. He's got shampoo in his hair, the suds are falling into his eyes, and she's taking this love potion. And so the whole scene is uncomfortable, awkward, and embarrassing for everybody involved because they're having to fight off this demon while both of them are in very vulnerable and awkward situations. But the way the scene was written was kind of annoying because the love potion was actually treated more as a horny potion. So instead of her being doe-eyed and fawning over Harry and getting in the way and making the scene as awkward and comedic as Butcher wanted it to be, because she took a love potion, so she's like being a puppy dog, like puppy dog love, and getting in the way and just like clinging to him is how the scene could have gone, but instead she was half naked and grinding on him and grabbing at his naked extremities. Totally unnecessary, but it was all played off for gags. It was all meant to be like, this is a weird, awkward situation we're in, right? And then in this book, in Full Moon, we have a character, you know, it's the werewolf trope, you transform, you're naked. We've all seen it before, but in this scene, the scene that really annoyed me in chapter 16 was a character who was not transforming. She was covered up, but then they needed a distraction, and so she just stripped down and, hold on, let me let the cat in the house. She was not transforming, she was in her human form, but she just stripped, they needed a distraction, so she just stripped down, and it was raining. And she just started dancing in the rain in front of these police officers in order to create a distraction so that Harry could walk by. And it's not, the thing with these scenes is it's not just the scene itself, because she could have easily just stripped down and then like done a dance, and everybody was like, what's going on, what are we doing here? And then Harry got by and then it was fine. But it's written in this way that's like the raindrops are falling on her naked breast, and then she's on all fours, and it's like it was just really reveling in what was happening. It wasn't even just a matter of fact, it was like, let's stay here for a while kind of scene. But I think the most annoying thing about these scenes is that, like, if you think about them for 2 seconds, it's like, it's not only is it not necessary, but it doesn't even logically work. She's doing this in front of police officers. This is illegal. This is public indecency. She's in a public area. They should have been like, ma'am, you need to stop. Like, even if they paused for a couple of seconds and then Dresden slipped by, they should have responded differently than they did. And then she just walks off, still butt naked in the rain in a public area. She just leaves, meets up with Dresden, and is like, hey, men are stupid. I can be naked, and then they'll be distracted. So it's like this was a stupid plan from the start. I'm not saying that this would never happen. I'm not saying that no cop would ever just let her continue on being naked in public somewhere else now. I'm not saying that would never happen. I'm just saying this is a stupid plan. Like, they staked their entire plan on this, when in most scenarios, if they did this, then the police would have been like, no, ma'am, you need to come in now because you can't do this. Anyway, I don't want to talk about this forever. I'm just trying to give exact examples, because just saying like this book has this problem without giving concrete examples just seems like maybe I could explain the thing that's bothering me. It's not that these scenes exist in the story, it's that they're put in unnecessarily and they don't even actually work because of the circumstances around them. Like, it's just stupid. It's just stupid and immature, and I think it's dumb. Now let's talk about some positive things. Harry, I really like him. In book one, I wasn't sure how I didn't think I would like him at the beginning of book one. By the end of book one, I was like, okay, maybe I do like him. I need to know him better, but I really like him. So he is a very competent character, very competent wizard, very competent detective. He knows what he's doing, and he's very adept at what he needs to get done, yet he is never the strongest person in the room. He's never the smartest person. He's never the hero that comes in and saves the day for everybody. He tries really, really hard to do his best by everybody he interacts with, but he's never the best. And that's constantly shown to us, whether he does something really cool like soul gazing, and then that scene is then turned around to like intimidate Harry and freak him out and show off how powerful the next guy is, or if it's like he just got into a huge battle, he just did a lot of stuff, and now he's seriously injured, and now he has to be carried out by a woman. And it's like these things that somebody who describes himself as old-fashioned constantly, somebody who is very traditional in his values, you would expect him to be like, I want to be the hero. I want to be the strongest guy. Like, I want to protect everybody. But he's actually quite humble when he's put in these positions where he has to lean on other people, or when he has to acknowledge that someone else is stronger than him. He's actually very humble and adapts and goes with it really well. And I quite like him. He's very giving, and he makes a lot of stupid decisions. Sometimes he does stuff and I'm like, dude, think for 2 seconds. But at the same time, sometimes he takes a blow, takes a hit, okay, I guess I have to give over this information that's really valuable, and if too much of this information is given, then I'm really vulnerable. But he does it in this calculated, yes, this is a bad choice, but this will help me help someone else. Like, he's great. Anyway, I still don't care about the detective stuff, and this is still very much a detective story, but it has so many other things that it's doing so well that I really like it. So I'm gonna finish this book now. This clip is a continuation of the last clip. So in the last clip, I aired out some of my grievances, some of my frustrations with the series so far. However, after I finished that clip, I realized that leaving that clip on its own, while I stand by everything I said in that clip, leaving that clip on its own might give the wrong impression of what the series is to anyone who's watching this having not read the series. So, a continuation of that thought. And while I do think that there are scenes in the series that are very frustrating to read, where it's the story itself that I take issue with, generally a lot of the issues are with Harry, and those things are acknowledged within the story. Doesn't make it necessarily fun to read, but I also don't want to give off the wrong impression about what the book is doing. I also want to acknowledge that while yes, all these things are a factor within this series, that's not the whole story. For instance, there are really strong female characters in this story. In fact, probably the main side character, at least in these 2 books, is a woman named Murphy, who is really killer. She's really strong, she's really capable, she works right alongside Dresden, and she's really great at standing up for herself and for kind of putting him in his place when he needs to be, as well as having her own dreams and ambitions, her own flaws, sometimes where she really messes up and has to clean up her own mess, much like Dresden regularly has to clean up his own mess because he's an idiot sometimes. Harry Dresden is our main character, so he's the head that we're in a lot of times, so I know him obviously better than I know Murphy, but I think that Murphy is just as well developed as Dresden, and I think that there are plenty of other female characters that are very strong and very empowered, and Harry's just a dum-dum who calls himself old-fashioned, but oftentimes stands in the way of these women actually being able to do what they need to do. But at the same time, he also has a decent amount of self-control. One of the scenes that I mentioned before with the love potion, it was a lust potion, when he was saying no and she was grabbing him and saying, you say no, your mouth says no, but this says yes. Again, not an acceptable thing, but she was also under the effects of a spell. His response, which I loved, was, yeah, but that thing says stupid stuff all the time. And it was a scene that could have gone real south depending on how Harry handled it, but Harry did his best despite this being a position that was, from his perspective, it was a very sexy scene, but he did his best to honor her and the fact that she wasn't in control of herself in that moment. And I feel like I've talked about it too long, but at the same time, I also want to fully explain my feelings on it without being unfair. I want to raise my objections and say the things that I'm not liking, but at the same time, I don't want to give off the wrong perspective to people who haven't read the series yet. I try to be careful with topics like this, at least in my Discord where I'm discussing these books. There are people who agree with me with my perspective on these scenes and these situations, and there are people that do not see it the same way as me. So I don't want to just throw out this blanket word and move on. I want to try to explain the things that I don't appreciate as well as the things that I do appreciate. I'm trying to give it the nuance that it deserves so that at the end of the day, If you have a completely different opinion than me, if you disagree with everything I have to say, fine, do it. That's your right. But I want to make sure that you and that everybody in the conversation is understood and that we're opening up room for us to have a conversation about it. And I hope I've done a decent job at that. Anyway, I finished Full Moon. I didn't like this one as much as book one, not because of the stuff that I've spent the last who knows how long in this video talking about, but just in general, I just didn't think it was as strong of a book. There were a lot of characters to keep track of. It didn't feel nearly as focused plot-wise. It just didn't feel as like streamlined, strong, where I was really praising a lot of the technical stuff about book one, and a lot of the technical stuff about book two was still there. It just didn't feel as strong. So book one might have been like a 4-star, whereas book two is a 3-star. Didn't hate it, but I don't have as much to report on to say, whoa, this is done incredibly well. Still think the world building is great. I'm continuing to enjoy Harry as I learn more about him, as we get more seeds laid of things that we can pull from later on, like learning more, getting little tidbits about his background, about his family, specifically about his mother, and mysteries that are starting to open up about that, which is really exciting. And as I was hoping, relationships that were damaged in book one, those consequences stuck around, and Harry had to fight to clean up his mess. He had to fight to repair what he had damaged, and I just really, really like that. So yeah, still feeling good about these books, but I am hoping that book three will go back up to the level of book one, because once again, if there weren't so much hype around the series, I wouldn't continue on to book three. I would say, yep, this validated what I thought previous, that for the most part, these are standalones, and maybe there's going to be 1 or 2 threads that carry through, but for the most part, these are isolated detective stories within the same world, within the same characters. I don't care. But for you, I will continue on. And I'm having a good time, so I'm happy to continue on too. So, on to book three. I started book three, Grave Peril. I'm not quite halfway done with it, but I'm nearly there, and oh my goodness, this is easily my favorite one so far. So, this book opens up with a haunting. If you don't know this about me, I love hauntings. Haunted ships, haunted houses, haunted islands. I, in fact, have been looking up, just this week, looking up books for October that are all around hauntings. And then I begrudgingly started this book when I've been knee-deep into finding a bunch of haunting books. And do you know that it starts off with such a good haunting scene with a ghosty lady who is who's confused, who doesn't understand where she is, or that she's actively harming people, and Dresden has to break her out of this trance, and he has to try to get her to stop the terrible harm that she's about to cause. And it's such a good opening scene. Oh my goodness, if you never want to read a Dresden book, but you can get just Grave Peril from the library and just read that opening scene, I beg you to do so, if you like hauntings. But one thing that I love about the Dresden Files so far is that he's taking a lot of fantasy tropes, a lot of fantasy creatures that we are familiar with, that we've seen in a bunch of different contexts, and he just does them in the unique Dresden way. So each book, at least so far, has been, okay, what fantasy creature are we exploring in a unique way this time? And this time, there's at least some ghosties happening, but also there's gonna be vampire stuff. Well, there's already been vampire stuff going on, which I'm distinctly less interested in, but hey, it's here. But also we have a new companion that's been introduced. His name is Michael. He is fascinating. Like, he's such an easy character to love right from the start, but then also his dynamic with family, and he's very, very different from Harry, from Dresden, in his lifestyle choices, in his beliefs around the world, in the way he interacts with the world, and his differences in worldviews and in the way that he interacts with magic are validated and respected, and I really appreciate the way that this is all playing out, at least so far. And through these differences between these two characters and watching them interact together, we're also getting a lot more deepening and understanding the magic of this world and the mechanics of it as well, and I'm enjoying it so much. Anyway, these are just beginning reactions for Grave Peril. I'm sure I'll have more to say about it as we go on, but I'm really enjoying this one. It's very good. I like it a lot. Hey, so it's the same same time that I just did that intro clip. I just moved outside so Corey could get back to work. I finished Grave Peril, and oh my goodness, I'm completely sold. I'm totally in. This book won me over. I started this book and I told my friends, I'll give it a couple more books, but I don't know. I'm still not sure. Done. I'm sold. It's over. Yeah, I'm a Dresden fan. Doors closed. Let's go. Let's move. I loved this book so much. I don't remember what I said in the last clip, so I'll tell you the same thing again, maybe. Sorry about that. This book had hauntings. I remember I told you that. It had a walking nightmare creature thing. I won't tell you about it because spoilers, but it could get Harry in his sleep. It could get him in his real life. It could get to the people that he loves. It had vampires, which I, again, don't care so much about, but there was some good humor around the vampire stuff and a specific vampire event with Harry and the way he was dressed. Anyway, there was a fairy godmother, which I know sounds what, but not what you would expect. Even she managed to be horrifying and creepy and disturbing and maniacal. We got to go to different realms. We got new characters, which I remember I talked to you about Michael in the last one. Michael is a man where, okay, so I love Michael. He's probably my favorite character of the series now. I love him so much. I really hope we get more of him. Michael is a character where his faith is really important to him, and that affects how magic works around him. And it's so fascinating the way it's done. Like, it adds to the magic and the lore and just the depth of this world. But also, I rarely see discussions around faith in fantasy done so respectfully and in a nuanced way. So you have Michael, where his faith makes the way the magic around him work differently, and it works as an asset and it's validated. But at the same time, Harry, who is not, he does not have the same worldview or view of life as his friend Michael does. The way he sees things is also honored and respected and validated. And the way he has some really good internal dialogue about his very complicated feelings around God and around Michael's faith. And Michael and Harry are able to have really open discussions around their different worldviews, and then they move forward together as friends, working together in different ways. And it's so nuanced. I loved the way Butcher handled this so much. I believe I mentioned in one of my clips for the second book that we also got some intrigue around Harry's past and his mom. We got way more of that intrigue in this book, and by way more I mean a little bit more, but it got really excited. Like, it got me really excited, so it affected me a lot more. But there's a lot of intrigue about what's to come, and a lot of seeds being laid about, like, there's more, and it's all getting connected, and it's all proving like it's going to matter. Things are getting set up in this book. Things are being established that I know have to come back around in some way. And the plot of this book was amazing. The plot of this book was so thrilling and disturbing and funny and fun. And I think that Butcher is really good about creating a very engaging plot and making it both complicated and layered, but also very just through line and feeling like nothing is dragging and he's not leaving me for want in depth or in pacing. He's just a really good writer. People are way too hard on him as a writer. I mean, I'm sure you love him, but I've just heard people kind of dog these early books, and I can't imagine how. What? I mean, I can. It's not perfect. Okay, let's talk about that. This series is very fan servicey, at least here at the beginning. The way women are described, the certain positions, the certain scenarios that characters get themselves into, it can lean to fan servicey. And some people like fan service, some people don't mind it, some people find it grating if it's a constant in a series. How you feel about that is up to you. Personally, I find it grating. That is my one complaint in what is otherwise a fantastic trilogy. It's not a trilogy. Fantastic opening 3 books in a series that I will continue to read. And it's a worthy complaint. It's worth being talked about, but this series is phenomenal otherwise. My goodness, I loved this last book so much. I just really hope that this series continues to be like this kind of awesome. Like, it can, not ghosties, it doesn't always have to be ghosts, but you know what I mean? Like, the first book I thought was fantastic. That was like a 4-star, great time. Book 2 was a step down. It was good, I enjoyed it, it was still, you know, solid story. And then book 3 just blew me out of the water. I love this book so much. 5 stars, all the stars. Loved it so much. Wow, I never planned on reading the series. I just wasn't even gonna pick it up. Thank you, Gabby and Lynn, for convincing me that I would love it. Oh my goodness. There you go. Those were my reactions for reading the first 3 books of the Dresden Files. I can tell you that I'm very surprised at how this went, but like pleasantly surprised. I'm so happy. I will continue to read the series, probably just 1 a month, just to, you know, not burn myself out and just enjoy the ride, but I am continuing for sure. If you want to keep up with my reading of the series, if you enjoy seeing me read it for the first time, then you'll have to follow my review channel, where I keep people updated. I do reading vlogs week to week, talk about what I'm reading every week, and I'll update you there when I read another Dresden book. That's always linked in the description. Oh, also you can follow me on my Patreon if you want to. We're buddy reading these books over there. We have a Dresden channel where we're talking about it as we read through it. That's fun. Anyway, chat with me more about it in the comments. What do you think about the series? Do you like it? Do you hate it? If you haven't read it yet, do you plan to read it? I post videos every Monday and Friday on this channel, Tuesdays and Thursdays on my review channel, which is linked in the description. I'll see you again soon. Bye.